You're just another bundle of toxic masculinity.
Wow, that's rich. Coming from someone who calls themselves Hammerhead.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and now beyond, Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Let's just get this over with so I can watch Dexter.
Oh, my God.
I need it.
I can't believe you just discovered Dexter.
I may be the last person
Yes.
who's like catching on to the show.
Yeah. Nobody tell her anything about what happens going forward. There's going to be some highs and some lows, Drea, but...
How many seasons do we...
I don't even know.
Should we maybe switch over into Dexter?
I'm thinking that's not something that we should do, at least not yet. We should still finish up with Doom Patrol Season 1 before we even contemplate Dexter. But I don't think...
But Dexter.
Yeah. All right, well, the sooner we get through this nice episode for all of our lovely listeners, you can get back to Dexter. Let's talk a little bit before we get into episode 4 of Doom Patrol, Cult Patrol. Let's talk about a couple of things, a couple of little announcements. First of all, I want to give a shout out to our good friends, Jason Inman and Ashley Robinson. They just started a Kickstarter for the second volume of their comic book, Jupiter Jet, which you and I recently discovered and really enjoyed the first volume. So they've got a Kickstarter that just launched, and in 2 days, they were already like 75% of their goal. So it's awesome. You should check it out and consider donating if you can. They are fantastic folks. You would also probably know them as the hosts of Geek History Lesson, a fantastic podcast. Check it out. And go support their Kickstarter. What else have you got, Drea?
It might be a little too early to announce anything quite yet or to point anyone to a link, but I did write a couple of articles about Harley Quinn. And this is probably, like previous articles I've written about, like the Joker and Ray and Kylo Ren. Like, these are very deep psychological dives into the psychology of the characters.
And anchored to an upcoming release of
yes.
some kind.
Yeah, so Birds of Prey is coming out in early February. And so to accompany that, these are articles meant to kind of explore and examine the character and really build excitement around the psychology. Interestingly, Suicide Squad, which was like from 2016, gave us a glimpse into Harley from the perspective, really not so much of her relationship with the Joker. There's a little bit of that, but I really wanted to focus on her experience as a detainee in Belle Reve, where she was held for some time, kept in isolation, deprived of...
Tortured.
She was tortured, abused. There's some pretty heavy... trauma there, but also I think it's helpful for us to understand her psychology when we see the kind of the culmination of that. It's not only the Joker that introduces these forces, the trauma, the unhealthy relationship, so forth. There are other aspects of the way the world is treating her that I think is really important to think about. And so I really try to examine those other forces, Amanda Waller being one of them. Yeah. How she's objectified and how her emotional states are weaponized in Suicide Squad. So if that interests anybody, we'll definitely connect people through a link in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Not available yet, but coming up. Stay tuned. Let's talk about Cult Patrol. Drea, I know that you mentioned as we started to watch this episode that this is where your first viewing of the season started to lose you a little bit. We start getting into less information about their past, less information about their characters, and more of the straight up superhero-y, magic-y, powers and, that stuff.
I don't mind the supernatural elements. I don't mind kind of the dimensional other worlds, the introduction of new characters. Like all of that was exciting, but I think I just tried to find some balance here and just some, like, I tried to ground myself. Who am I supposed to be following? Who is meant to be, what's that word when we think of a story? And it's like whoever you're supposed to follow, the person you relate to, or the person
the proxy.
Yeah, is that the right?
Like who is the who is our proxy in this?
Who is that?
I think if we were probably going to, as awful as this sounds, if we were probably going to say that we were anyone, we might be Cyborg, only because he is not sort of freakish like the rest of them, and he's the one person who wants to be. Wow,
you're so judgmental.
No, what I mean though is
BT Dubs, he's totally freakish.
No, I understand, but he is the one who appears to have adapted to that, and he has embraced it to the point of, now that's not to say he doesn't have his problems, but he has embraced it to the point that he wants to be a hero. So he wants to move things forward.
He is the most integrated. Like I would say the words, he is the most integrated.
Correct.
He is functional.
And everyone else is sort of holding us back. And that includes
They're
us.
not there yet.
Yeah, us, the audience. We are not prepared to take these steps, or we are probably more prepared to take these steps forward than anyone else in the cast except for Cyborg. And so if there's a new person that we are learning about the family through, it's probably him.
I think that's my struggle with this show, is that I'm trying to find somebody, this common thread that I can connect to. I don't have to relate to them one to one. Like I'm not expecting to see myself in them or anything like that. But, and I don't know if this is a criticism of the show so much as just my personal need to find a connecting, I don't know, some kind of connecting person, somebody who's going to give me that thread that just stays pretty consistent. And so far it's like moving around, it's shifting around for me.
The characters have been pretty consistent though. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that Batman is my proxy going into Batman the Animated Series. I would not, it is certainly his show and everything is sort of through his perspective, but I wouldn't say that I relate to him. Now, he is a pretty solid character who's not going to change a ton throughout the series. And I would say that these characters haven't changed a lot. They've evolved a little bit, but we're still focusing on Larry in this episode. We're still focusing on the relationship between Cliff and Jane. Or not Jane, because we've not seen her in a while. And
we've seen her alters.
Correct.
She has 60 different personalities.
Yes, but Crazy Jane has not made the appearance. Like the one character that Cliff, the one alter that Cliff has most connected with has sort of abandoned him.
Maybe
for the
that's
last
why
couple
I
episodes.
feel dysregulated. Maybe Jane is giving me balance and she's been hidden, while Hammerhead and Baby Doll and some of her other alters are.
And we were introduced to another one in this episode, and I found it a little unsettling and a little curious, but we'll get to that. Like I said, though, this episode follows mostly Larry, mostly Cliff and Hammerhead, really. And we get a little bit of Rita. Cyborg is still sort of stuck in that role of, come on, guys. And he's sort of coming off a little douchey. Like the more and more we move forward with him.
Yeah, I have thoughts about that I will definitely
the less
share.
We like him. We should say that this episode sort of jumps off the rails from the last three, which have all been focused and driven toward finding the chief. This episode has nothing to do with that. I mean, they mentioned that they need to do it. It's almost as if the writers are acknowledging to the audience, yeah, we get it. There's a thing we need to go do. But this episode follows the cult of the unfinished book, which is, we see in the very beginning a lovely family celebrating the birthday of their kid. The next year, he seems to have some tattoos and less clothes, and fewer clothes. And the next year, even fewer clothes and even more tattoos as he's getting older and older and older, until eventually...
And an interesting, hood.
Yeah. Everybody keeps putting... They keep replacing normal clothes with more cultish sort of garb. And he is raised believing that he is going to be a hero who is going to save the world. And his father every year gets a little more timid about this and a little more concerned, until eventually when he turns 18 or whatever the year is that the tattoos are complete on his body, he warns him that he is not going to save the world. He is going to destroy it and to run. And his mother kills her husband without any care in the world, because really they are there for one purpose and one purpose only, which is to raise this child that is going to bring about the end of the world. So that's new. That is, we've dealt with other sort of alternate dimensions, and, we've gone through a donkey's throat to another universe and seen things like that. But this is a little weird, because now we're dealing in magic. Now we're dealing in almost a John Constantine type universe. Let's talk about that. A new character is introduced.
John Constantine.
Well, maybe, probably. We are introduced to Willoughby Kipling. Drea, did you know anything about Kip when you were introduced to him as played by Mark Shepard? Mark. Willoughby Kipling is a character from the Doom Patrol comics. Interestingly enough, he was intended to be John Constantine. And in fact, if you look at his performance in this show, he's basically John Constantine.
The character...
So yeah, he was supposed to be John Constantine in Grant Morrison's run of Doom Patrol, but DC wouldn't let him use John Constantine, so he created another John Constantine, who was literally written exactly as if he were writing John Constantine, and he named him Willoughby Kipling.
I'm very big in the world of, shall we say, international strangeness.
He sort of has the John Constantine, this cool, careless, there's this air of authority, like you just trust that he knows what he's doing and he doesn't explain it to you. It's this sort of cool, mysterious bit.
Yeah. I mean, it literally is that character of, don't worry, I've got this. He's even British.
He's even smoking.
He's got
thing.
that. Yeah, absolutely. I'm smoking. I've got doors to other parallel universes. I've got this. I've got that. By the way, I've interviewed Mark Shepard. Cool. Just totally cool. If you picture, this is the guy that you are interviewing in real life, and I've also interviewed his father, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. That was for the Max Headroom box set. Just as cool as Mark, if not a little cooler, which is totally weird. But really good dude. And I'm always happy to see Mark Shepard on the TV screen. If you're fans of Battlestar Galactica, if you're fans of Supernatural, where he's sort of playing a similar type character, then, you can't help but to love Mark Shepard. Mark. The Middleman. He was also in The Middleman. So,
he does.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a tie-in in that Kipling knows the chief.
Yes.
They have a history. It's not clear, but they go back. They clearly have a history together. And Kipling says that he's there to look for the chief, that there's that connection, that's what brings him to the mansion.
It's kind of what I love about the chief. Like, we've seen so little of him since he disappeared, always in flashback, but he knows everybody. He's like a hub.
Well, and this is
everybody.
This is the first time that there's a hint. It's more straightforward than just hint, but the remark that the chief is not 100% good, that there are some things in his past.
He's got a dark history of some kind.
Yeah.
Well, we do know that there are things we don't know about the chief, because if we are meant to believe that he in some way was there during the creation of Mr. Nobody, then we are meant to believe that the chief is significantly older than he appears. And Niles Calder may not be the man we all know. So I'm interested in learning more and more about Niles as we move forward. But at least now we know that he has history with Kipling, who has been sent to the mansion to find Niles because he is tracking down this cult of the unfinished book. The unfinished book, as we sort of alluded to, is the tattoos on this child. And once that is done being written, they are supposed to read the scripture on the body of the kid, and it's going to bring about basically the harbinger, the end of the earth. And Kipling is refusing to let that happen. He's recruiting Doom Patrol to help. Naturally, the only person who was instantly on board is Cyborg, who has mapped out different dimensions and has them stored in his memory banks, and he is hollow projecting them. We do get a little bit of carryover from the previous episode with his relationship with Rita. There's a little bit of tension there. Rita sort of made it clear in the last episode that she wasn't really into all of this super heroism. She didn't really aspire to be as aggressively heroic as Cyborg. And he is kind of taken aback by that. He's sort of written her off. And we get a little bit more of that as there is a group meeting and she is noticeably missing. And when she shows up, this is what we hear.
Where's Rita?
I'm right here. I guess my invite got stuck at Western Union, or is this what passes as a cold shoulder nowadays?
Neither. It's a meeting about where we stand in search for the chief.
Apparently there's 37 dimensions.
I see that, yes.
Rita, you're welcome to sit in if you want. But I just figured, given our conversation, you probably want to sit this one out. You know, not being into it and all. But I'm sure we can think of something for you to do if you want. Where was I?
The interesting thing about this is not so much this conversation as a conversation that she has immediately after with Larry, who doesn't necessarily take her side. Let's take a listen to this.
Thanks for standing up for a gal, Larry. Remind me never to count on you for anything.
Not in the mood, Rita. Not today.
Of course not. You're on his side.
Oh, right. You want me to pretend Vic was lying about you?
Just try supporting me for once. Jane as Cliff, who do I get?
You think I have a choice? This thing inside me wants to be involved.
So we are getting a little more with Rita, even if she isn't being heroic. We are getting a definitive character that is different from the others. What did you think about Rita?
I almost want to. I see everyone's reactions as different. At very what I would consider individualized, but not surprising responses to the call to action.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. And so a part of me is critical of Cyborg for setting these expectations, almost imposing his definition of civic duty or
I wonder how much of that has been imposed on him, though. How much of that
well,
is...
that's what makes me sort of frustrated with him,
Yeah.
is that he holds these beliefs. He has these constructs that he carries around about what it's like to be a good hero. Part of that is what his father instilled in him. And part of it is what he, as a trauma survivor, believes he must do. A part of it is in comparison to Batman, not quite filling Batman's shoes, and also being even feeling superior to even someone like Batman, like secretly feeling like he's actually a better hero than Batman could be, because he has these abilities and he can harness all these different strengths within him that makes him almost a more resilient hero.
Yeah.
And then he imposes these ideals and expectations to Rita, who hasn't yet even come to a place where she's integrating the heroic identity and her existing identity, her concept of herself, her sense of self.
Yeah.
And so I wish that she's clearly saying, I need to work this out. I'm not going to blindly follow this call to action. I'm not going to blindly enter risky situations. She's not a risk taker.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the moment that she gets toward the end of the episode. There's a moment where, from another dimension, various magical beings come into the world via these portals, and they are coming to take the kid, Elliot, and have him whisked away so that the book can be read. And she is protecting him. She has a nice motherly moment where he believes at one point he should just suicide because it's just going to make everything easier. And he finds that he doesn't have, quote unquote, the strength to do it. And she has a beautiful moment with him where she kind of saves the day just in this one little speech. Let's play it here for you.
Elliot, what the hell do you think you're doing? Aren't you supposed to be downstairs with Larry?
Why? So I'll be safe? It's all pointless. I'm fighting destiny, and why? My life's destroyed anyway, so decided I'd help everybody out and just kill myself.
Well, this is only the second floor. You wouldn't kill yourself. Maybe break an arm or a leg. Plus, to be fair, you'd have to die and be burned if you wanted to really save everyone.
It doesn't matter. Because I'm so weak I couldn't even try. I'm a failure. I'm a failure. The whole world's gonna pay for it.
Hey, stop that. It's going to be okay. Come here. This world is a beautiful, horrible place. It's spectacular. You don't need the burden of ending it. Maybe the people in this house can't save you. We failed before. But can you at least let us try?
It is a fantastic moment, and she is showing strength in words where others are trying to show strength with sonic cannons on their arms and brute strength as they're destroying these characters that are made of unsent letters and human flesh and, you know, whatever. And so she's got this beautiful moment, but she really comes into her own the moment that Kipling decides they have lost, and he comes in with a flaming sword and he's about to kill the kid. And she, very much like Mr. Fantastic, stretches out her arm, presses Kipling.
Probably the best moment of the episode, I think.
Yeah.
This like turning point where she's reluctant to take part.
Not even reluctant. Well, yeah, you're right.
She's like
You're right.
rejecting
Yeah.
participation in this. She's even in I would say she's pretty clear and direct about her unwillingness to be a part of whatever wild course of action they're going to take.
Yeah, see, I was saying, I thought you were taking it in the opposite direction. Up to this moment, she has been hesitant to participate in anything.
Yeah.
And the moment it comes to protecting a human being, she jumps into action without even thinking about it. She stretches that arm, she presses Kipling up against the wall, knocking the sword out of his hand, and makes it very clear this kid is under my protection. And that I thought was great because it was this triggering moment of you get to see that she has principles, that there are things she is willing to fight for. We just haven't seen them yet. And in this moment, it's a motherly, because I'm
not sure there's this, you've said motherly a couple times. So
the reason being,
walk me through like where, because I think I know where that might come from, but like, what is that other than her being female? Like, what do you know?
We know that. Well, we know that there is a past with her and a child of some kind. We got that from the episode where she was given the opportunity to fulfill this fantasy of being on set, and then she was haunted by something in a carriage that was crying, and we never fully established what that was. We only know that there was something about it that was haunting to her. And we know that when she comes to him at the window, she treats him in a very maternal, like, this is not, the others are being hyper masculine, lots of testosterone. We need to fight everything. We are superheroes. And she comes in with the most nurturing approach to get him to come off the ledge, and to get him to understand that the world is hard and that she is there for him.
I'm not committed to the idea that Rita is being maternal. I think she's being protective. I think you use the word nurturing. I think she's being nurturing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what makes it maternal. I do agree that this is one of the most compassionate things we've seen. I mean, I think Cliff can be pretty compassionate in his weird way.
Yes.
I don't know. Would you say he's being paternal with Jane? So I guess if we're looking at like someone being protective and compassionate and putting the needs of that, in this case, that young person, like this is barely a kid, then yes, she's being maternal. But I think what is most striking about what you said is the others are relying on forces that are about action and violence and defense and kind of, and I think it's probably all warranted. They're being attacked by these supernatural nuns and these like weird assassins made out of paper that basically they all look like the Question.
Yeah.
So they have to be in the mode of warfare.
Well, but it's not them though. It's Kipling. Like Kipling, who is ostensibly on their side, comes to kill the kid, and she refuses to let it happen.
Right. Up till then, they're all sort of in this defense mode.
Right.
And she's using this protective approach to do something that I think she thinks is right. And it's interesting because this is where the needs of one person, the life of one person, is above everybody else. Because potentially this is the kid, if all his tattoos are read aloud, the decreator comes everyone dies. Like not just that, like the whole world, the universe ceases to be. It's a very abstract idea. So what she does is very risky, and it's not impulsive. What she does is it's thoughtful, it's thought out. She is not acting on impulse. And that is the most that we've seen from her as far as what her moral code looks like. I just wonder, like, clearly it became personal for her, and I wonder where that comes from. I think there's something there that lives in her. There is something that is encouraging her, inspiring her to be this way, and I wonder what that is. We don't really know yet.
Yeah. I don't know if it's impulsive or not. I viewed it more as instinctive, in the same way that if somebody came through a portal right here in this wall, I would, without thought, instinctively protect you.
Oh, that's so maternal.
And
of
I think
you.
that you would protect me.
Thank you for being motherly.
Well, I'm being, but my motherly was not necessarily in that moment. Although, in the Wild Kingdom, the women or the mothers are the ones you don't mess with when it comes to the kids. But for me, where everyone else saw this kid as an object, she saw this kid as a person and talked him down. And you don't get a lot of stories, for good or for bad. You don't get a lot of stories of a paternal character coming up and saying all of those things to the child. Like, she was very nurturing, and you don't get the nurturing aspect from the paternal side. And I don't mean maternal being woman versus man, or paternal being father versus, but there is this, I don't know, it's a weird stereotype. And, yes, I use the word maternal, but maybe that's wrong. Either way, she prevents him from being killed, but is not able to protect him from being taken when an additional portal is opened up and the kid is taken away. You mentioned Cliff and Jane. Let's talk about Cliff and Jane, because right afterward, once again, as we've seen as sort of formulaic in these episodes, they keep splitting the group up, and Cliff and Jane seem to be most often put together. They go together to Nirnheim, which is a otherworldly dimension. Looks really strange. Kind of looks like there's snow on the ground, but there isn't. The buildings don't look real, and we learn a little bit about their relationship, but we are also introduced to
Tiny Tim. Sorry. Tiny Tim. Wait, why can't I do an English accent?
Go for it.
Tiny Tim. Is that right?
Tiny Tim? Yeah, that's
Tiny Tim.
Tiny Tim.
Tiny Tim.
Well, except that we're not introduced to Tiny Tim, but who are we introduced to?
Tiny Tim.
Tonight Tim?
I don't remember. Some small, youthish, youngish British girl.
Oh, you mean her alter? Yes.
Yeah. Who did you think I was talking about?
I wasn't entirely sure where we were going with this. Yes. I thought you meant because we do meet a couple of people in Nirnheim. Yes, she is a bit waifish. He thinks that she is going to fight with him because all of her alters have all fought before. And instead she just gives right up, which is maybe good, maybe bad.
Well, along with Baby Doll, this is a character who is, or this is an alter who is more fear-driven, passive, maybe even cooperative. Like, there could be some good things that aren't readily apparent. Like maybe this is somebody who would be quite supportive and cooperative, and when they're not in a dangerous situation, could get along quite well with Cliff. But right now they're essentially being captured and brought into the throne room of what looks like a twisted queen and king version of the parents who raised the book child.
Yeah. Who seem to acknowledge that the end is nigh and there's really nothing anyone can do about it. They put Cliff and Jane through an interesting test where they allow one another to sort of see how the other views themselves. And Cliff sees his daughter there with where Jane like takes the place, or his daughter takes the place of Jane, and he challenges that. He says, you know, are you suggesting that I see her as my daughter? And I think it's what we've been saying since episode 1. He absolutely sees her as his daughter and as the relationship he wishes he could have. Like he's trying to connect to her the same way that he wishes he could connect to his daughter, who he believed was dead. Turns out she may not be, and he's just not had the nerve to connect with her. But he feels like he can connect and be protective of Jane, but also, you know, I'm going to say it, the fatherly figure. But we've been saying it for the last 3 episodes,
right.
So it's not that, you know, yeah, he sees her as, and it seems like he doesn't want to admit that. Whereas,
he's very offended by the implication.
Yeah. Whereas we see that she may view him as a brain in a jar.
No. She views him as the robot man with blood covering.
Oh, right.
Like the first, there's a couple versions. The first one is he's covered in blood splatter, like a pretty gory representation of what he must have looked like after what they call Paraguay. Like Paraguay is the code. Paraguay is the code for something really bad happened there. And he does ask her, you know, as they're going on this kind of side journey, he's asking at one point Hammerhead, like, what the heck happened? Why are you so standoffish? Why isn't Jane here? And all that she really shares with him is like Paraguay. You have to know that what happened in Paraguay really impacted me. And it's the violence. It's so interesting because she was just as violent, and Hammerhead is an incredibly violent alter.
Yeah.
But I think somewhere in that accusation was his real self, something about his real self coming out. His real self must be so aggressive and violent and brutal without mercy. Jane's or Hammerhead's accusation is that he is that way inherently, like he is simply that way. Meanwhile, she is, or her alters are violent and defensive because they have to be.
Yeah.
I think that her claim is, and I don't know that she's wrong here, but her claim is she's incurred so much abuse and so much victimhood that she has had to be on the defense. She's had to engage in brutality to protect herself.
Yeah. Or to protect and this might be sort of semantics, but to protect her core persona, which is Kay, this character that we're sort of introduced to, especially
Tiny Tim
in the church. No.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because remember, and that's the interesting thing is remember I when I explained who Kay was in the comics, and when she split, when she created those alters, it was because of some significant sexual abuse and trauma that she underwent in a church. You know, so it it sort of appears from this episode that they are acknowledging that is the origin of this character. And so I'd be interested to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty what I would call a good moment, but maybe what a lot of people would call like an upsetting scene where Jane, I'm using Jane as just to denote the character, but Jane and Cliff go into that church. Their mission is to simply sew up the stigmata holes in the priest who's in this church in Spain minding his own business and happens to be the mechanism by which this portal opens elsewhere. This very innocent but horrified priest is hiding in the church with these holes in his hands, like completely,
with light coming out of them.
Yeah, it's completely traumatic for him. He's horrified. In walk Jane and Cliff, and I would consider this a traumatic, almost like the couple of things. Like clearly this is a trigger for Jane. She begins to kind of take in her surroundings. She goes up to the altar, or this is how long it's been since I've been in church, what I would call an altar.
I think they're still called altars.
Yeah? Okay. It's been a while.
I think they have been for hundreds, thousands of years. Yes.
And then she goes, she's present, but then she goes into what could be either a flashback or a moment of dissociation, because she's in kind of this, she freezes up a bit after she takes in her surroundings, and she's very distracted. She's sort of not in her body. She's not really present with herself. And when Cliff tries to engage her, like, come back to where have you been? Like, come back. She immediately attacks the priest. Yeah. And it's a very impulsive, quite upsetting, very volatile moment. But I also feel like that's what it is like for her to come out of either a dissociative state or moving back and forth between altars, or coming back from a flashback. So some sense where her body is not connected to her brain, where she sort of feels this out of body, sort of depersonalized experience, and has a hard time integrating back into the situation, because I think she would agree. If someone were to say to her, like, what are you here to do? I think she would agree. I'm here to sew this man's holes up and save the world.
Interesting. I'm not so sure. The reason I say that is the one person who pipes up and says, I can knit. We already know Rita can. Like Rita has the ability to sew/knit. She takes offense because she's like, oh, you think because I'm a woman, I know how to sew, I can do this, I can do that. Meanwhile, we've seen her watch her movies as she knits. So then Jane chimes in and says, I can knit. And they go, okay, we'll let Jane go. And
you think she wants to sabotage this?
I think it's a possibility. I'm not saying it's a definitive, but I'm saying it's a possibility because they know it's a priest that they are going to go help. So I think there's a chance that one of the altars is like, I can knit, knowing that they're going to go to a church, they're going to go to a priest, and she's going to get that opportunity to take out this, to lose control. Now, I'm not suggesting that she doesn't have the flashbacks. I'm not suggesting she doesn't lose control further than she expected to, but I think it is something worth thinking about that she went in knowing that she was going to have an altercation with a priest who is the origin. Well, he's not the origin,
right.
but
so for what purpose?
For that purpose, for the
that moment we saw.
For that moment.
So just to feel the sensation,
the vengeance,
the physical and sort of psychological ability to overcome a priest.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yes. I mean,
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, recently, I tie this into what I was writing about with Harley Quinn. I promise I'll connect this somehow. But one of the things that I was positing with Harley is that what we're seeing as, or what maybe Amanda Waller and the other Suicide Squad members see as wild and crazy and out of control, impulsive, like all that stuff, what that could actually be is a realistic, traumatized presentation. In other words, that because she's so dysregulated inside, because she's already tried to kind of numb out the multiple responses to the triggers, the multiple abuses from Belle Reve, from the Joker, from Waller herself, like just her struggle to kind of manage and stabilize herself, she almost dials up the need to be around kind of like risky and dangerous situations.
Yeah.
So with Harley, I compared her to trauma survivors who have what we would consider like this seemingly natural inclination or natural attraction to situations that resemble their trauma. Like, why would they go into dangerous situations? Why would Jane go into a church where a priest will clearly be there? But it is because they've confused pleasure and pain in such that they've found a way to access some kind of I don't know, feeling that they can't get in their everyday situations. So when Harley sits in jail and says she's bored, she is saying she wants to be in a very active, potentially volatile, potentially risky situation, so that she can at least feel alive.
Right.
And so it's almost this, it's almost like the meter, the gauge is sort of like busted, like it's not quite there, it's not quite balanced, and so they have to kind of turn it all the way up to extreme in order to just have a feeling, or have a feeling that gives them that sense that they're alive.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're numbed out. With Jane, she's found different ways to numb out because she has these alters. But here, if you're right, this is a situation where she willingly goes into a dangerous, risky, kind of like potentially violent situation, but knowingly, because it's going to resemble some of her past traumas. Is that kind of what you're connecting here?
Yeah, I think like many stories, if you've got a character who has the opportunity to take revenge on someone that represents the thing that hurt them, or in this case created them, because we've established that there isn't a whole lot of control over which alters do and don't come to the light. In Jane's case, it's whomever needs to for whatever purpose. And so there's no promise that the character, the alter that said, I can knit, is going to be the one that shows up in this church to sew up the hands of the stigmata. It's almost as if this character says, and if I remember, it was Hammerhead, because she was defensive when they looked at her like, wait, you knit? And she's like, yeah. What, you got a problem with that? And of all the characters, Hammerhead is the one that you would think almost might do this. Might go like, oh, you're going to put me in a room with a priest? Let's do it. Yeah. I'm going to show up and take out, all of this on this
concept of like, let me finally resolve this.
Yeah.
Not with the belief that the alters will all disappear or that they'll all integrate, but it's almost like she's saying, let me volunteer to at least face the symbolic perpetrator,
yes,
so that I can put this trauma to rest.
Not even to put the trauma to rest, because there are a whole lot of priests out there in the world, so I don't think it's a matter of putting it to rest, but it's an opportunity to get a little bit of satisfaction in that moment. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is absolutely the case. It's very possible that Hammerhead can knit and went with the intention of sewing this priest's hands shut. But it's certainly food for thought that this character went in knowing that she was going to face a priest, and that gave her an opportunity, because that also showed us a little bit of what if you know Kay, this is not the place this character should be. And
I almost like the idea that I can knit becomes code for rolling up your sleeves and saying, like, let me at whatever.
That's a shirt.
Force. Yeah,
oh,
no, it's
that's
gonna be
a
it's
shirt.
gonna be a
That's
shirt.
gonna be a TeePublic shirt. I can knit. Yeah, no, I don't know if I like the idea that Hammerhead did that, but I also kind of like the idea that Hammerhead did that. Like I sort of, because no one else in that group understands what that means.
Well, I guess what I would say, like the lovely thing about our different theories is that none of this could be true, or
Sure.
actually they could all be true.
It could all be true.
She could have, like, some element of this is that visceral feeling of defending oneself when one could not during their trauma. How fulfilling is that? Like, that sounds, I think your theory on that sounds on the mark. She may also be triggered by the sensations and go into a flashback. She may also,
she may have known that she was going to get triggered and hope to overcome it.
Yeah.
And then couldn't.
Or be like, I'm bored and I need adrenaline.
Yeah.
And that's what makes me feel alive, because I've been so numbed out.
Yeah.
So all of this could easily, work together to kind of help us understand why she steps in to do this thing. The interesting thing is, at the moment that she becomes Tiny Tim, or whatever that British character.
You're closer.
Is that
You're
better?
closer. You're closer.
Whatever that is, whoever that alter is, has withdrawn. And so maybe that is her, maybe that's Jane, or that's this collective saying, like, we're fatigued. And so the only person that can emerge is the sort of mousy, quiet, submissive alter, who's willing to be a part of the rest of this nonsense, which gets really odd and dark, and it doesn't quite end in a good place.
Yeah. May I ask, because it feels like we're only in the 4th episode, but it feels like forever. I miss Jane. Like, do you want to see Jane come back versus all of these other alters who don't seem as important? They aren't. We don't get enough with them to fully grasp them as characters. Whereas we haven't really gotten a whole lot with Jane either. But we at least feel connected to her as an alter. Do you?
I'm not sure.
Do you long for her to come back?
A little bit, but I appreciate the alters.
Sure.
I'd rather spend a significant amount of an episode with one alter than have her
splitting up black.
Yeah, like rapid cycle through.
Yeah.
I mean, that, like, think about when we've seen that in really like bad movies where it's just it's not realistic.
I don't disagree.
Upsetting. It's not helpful. Here, when we spend more time, even with someone like Hammerhead, we start to see that this is some part of Jane, or this is some part of her psychology, and we begin to better understand what Hammerhead's function is.
Yeah. Oh, I totally get that, and I appreciate that. It's just Jane is a likable character, and I find myself longing for that. Like I find myself, it's funny, in the beginning of this episode, we see Cliff dreaming about life as a human again, way back when. His daughter comes up to him, asks if she can take a nap on him, He says, yeah, absolutely. And we see her lay her head down, and then we dissolve to this moment where he's Robot Man and who we think is Jane on his chest. But Hammerhead wakes up really angry about the fact that they are being intimate. And I don't mean that in a sexual, I mean like they're
that they've
literally
bonded.
sharing intimacy. And so which further lends credibility to he sees her as his daughter sort of hypothesis that is posited to him later. And as she woke up and was angry, I found myself longing for Jane. Like
you wish she had.
I
wish
want
Jane
the connection.
would have woken up.
Yeah, I want the
well,
connection.
maybe that's purposeful. Maybe we're meant to have that sense of disconnection.
He does ask, why did Jane come into my room last night? Like, we didn't get to see it, but apparently Jane did show up.
But this is also how others feel around this person.
Yeah.
This sort of feeling of being disconnected from them and wanting parts of them to be consistent, wanting them to be a certain way that we can rely on.
Well, then that answers your question. The camera is our proxy. The actual camera is our proxy because we are seeing, like we are feeling the same thing, because only in the scenes that we see, we're like, are you really going to, come on.
Well, maybe Cliff is our proxy.
Maybe. He may have been in the pilot. Well, but that's not even true. I wouldn't know that we can relate. We could, I don't know.
Well, something that in the last episode, I was thinking of something that connected everything. And we talked a bit about this concept of control, whether it was lacking control or asserting control or controlling different parts of our experiences, our bodies, social control, things like that. Here, when I looked at the connective tissue, I felt like, even though we've talked about trauma in the past, that this is one of the most glaring ways in which each of their experiences, each of the Doom Patrol members represent a traumatic response, or represent one way in which we could realistically see a person respond to trauma. And we've shared that like they have different experiences of trauma, that they all have these pretty distinct origin stories, and that most of them have had their own distinct traumatic past.
Right.
But for instance, one of the first things I thought about was Rita's clear position on whether they would engage in this new course of action. And for me, that was her needing to preserve her personhood. And this happens with some of us who experience trauma. One of the first things we do is try to just keep ourselves the same, like just preserve who we are, whether that be our identity, whether that be our role, our jobs. And so when you see people who have experienced something pretty horrific or terrifying, to like oddly go into routine, like go, cook breakfast and get on the bus or get in the car, and kind of like almost in an upsetting way, like just kind of try to go back to normal. That's a very, very common way to kind of react to something very abnormal and disruptive, to try to create or preserve normalcy in that way. Some of that is actually quite healthy for us, because we need to have balance. We need to have a sense of something to rely on. We need to have an anchor,
sure,
in terms of our psychology. But I noticed that with Rita, that was something that really stood out for me. She needed to stay Rita, and she could not change. She could not really move one way or another. She kind of had to stay where she was. The other character that really kind of frustrated me was Cyborg. And Cyborg, already somebody who, I mean, you called him a D, but already someone who is a proactive, like he likes to take action. He's a thinker. He's a decision maker. He likes to round the group up. Let's rally.
He's a bit too militant about it, though.
Right. And so he actually, like, I almost saw it dial up a bit where he is what I would use the words like this narcissistic leader. Like he, again, because of what he's experienced, he needs to kind of go into this mode of, we've got to be effective. We got to take action. We have to, actually the opposite of Rita. We have to now go in and do something that matters because this big thing has happened to us.
Right. But do you think that he has something to prove? Do you think that he's overcompensating because he is suddenly, like, if you think of the Justice League, Cyborg is not Batman. He's not Superman. You know, at the very least, he is, at the very most, he is number 3 in the group. And let's be honest, he is
Barely.
not. He is not number 3 in the group.
I think
so
he has
do you
some.
think
Yeah, I
that
definitely think he has something to prove. But in this case, he's trying so desperately to assert control.
Yeah.
and assert leadership. Yes, I think the idea that it's some kind of overcompensation, that he's convincing himself that this is what he needs to do.
Yeah.
It misses the point because, like you were pointing out with the need to actually be compassionate toward this young kid who is objectified as the book, Cyborg kind of misses that. He misses that moment, or he misses that idea because he's caught up with trying to assert control.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
And Larry, who we didn't really talk about too much in this episode, but Larry also kind of represents another way in which people respond to trauma or life-threatening situations, in that he turns to this, it's almost like he lets the energy, we've been calling it an entity or spirit, like he kind of gives it the wheel a little bit. Like he almost kind of gives it up. And that worried me. He kind of gave up.
Now, what do you mean?
Like
when did he sort of give up? Because the entity can leave anytime it wants.
Yeah, the entity the entity is independent, but I felt as though when they were integrated and Larry was interacting with the other team members, that he wasn't really as proactive, that he was kind of stuck.
Well, we did hear what I thought was a really interesting moment when he's telling Rita that, we heard it just a bit ago, that he is stuck. The entity inside him wants to be a hero, and therefore he has to go along with the ride. You know, he doesn't have a choice.
Yeah, he's a passenger.
Yeah.
Which I think is, I'm not saying that that's necessarily maladaptive for him. Maybe there is a sense of, maybe there is a benefit to letting go, to giving the wheel over, being able to be comfortable not knowing. I was just talking about this today with a colleague of mine at UCLA, that like often students want such specific answers. So when we're teaching, we're telling them about various philosophies, or we're talking about even things like psychology, there's the, but what if this happens? Especially when it comes to safety on our campus. Like, what if somebody shows up with a gun? What if somebody is telling me they're about to, or what if someone threatens that they're going to do something violent on this campus? And we have these conversations about, like, yes, we have emergency protocols. We have a lot of helpful resources. We have an incredibly responsive set of teams that do enable these processes to happen, and the campus is quite safe. But we don't know how people will actually react. We cannot predict behavior. We can only provide safeguards and learn some of the techniques to keep ourselves and our community safe. And yet, and I admire this out of students, but many of them will say, but tell me exactly what to do. But I also admire and really respect our ability to live with uncertainty. and to not completely, I want to give Larry credit. He's not completely giving up and lying down and just letting the spirit move in and out of him. But this concept of being open to not fully controlling his body, not fully controlling his actions, therefore not fully controlling his environment, and being willing to kind of live in that uncertain space. Out of all of these different ways to respond, they all could be beneficial. They all could be adaptive ways that we deal with trauma. Even Jane, who is, as we talked about, kind of moving in and out of these altars and trying to regulate herself. Everyone is trying to find a way to adapt to the terrors that they're being exposed to.
Yeah. One thing that we did learn about Larry, and I'm glad you brought him up.
Oh my gosh, the voice.
Well, yeah. And I think we can talk about it a little more in future episodes because I imagine we'll learn more. But it was hinted upon. Well, I do have a little bit of audio here of the chief interviewing the voice.
Now, how do you sustain yourself in Captain Trainor's body? How do you live in there?
Torture.
How's that? Torture? How? Physically? No. Hold on. Let's keep going. I have many more questions I want to ask you.
I don't know what's more amazing, that you could turn a magic bullet upside down and it could be this communication device that can let an entity, a supernatural entity, communicate with us. But that was definitely a magic bullet. But look closely, rewind.
When you
look
say
at
magic bullet, though, which kind are you talking about?
the blender.
Got it.
Or that the entity expresses itself and that it's in limbo. It's like in a painful purgatory or some middle ground, and that staying in Larry's body is torture.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this. By the way, something that the listeners don't know, we've never actually come out and said this. You and I only made it to episode 5 of Doom Patrol before we decided this is a show we need to cover. We've never seen beyond episode 5. So I am very much looking forward to seeing where this relationship goes beyond what we just saw and beyond the next episode, which folks can hear in a couple of weeks. But Drea, are you liking where the show is headed?
The rewatch is much better for me.
Yeah.
The rewatch, maybe because we're watching it for the show, it sort of helps me understand the story a bit.
We were so excited about it when we were watching it. We were like, oh my God, we have to cover this. But we were still just watching it for enjoyment. Now we're actually...
It's still a little chaotic for me. I much prefer like a Dexter style show where like it's just killing and killing and then killing, explanation
and
killing.
narration explaining
just
the
telling
voice
me
of
what's going on. It's a head scratcher because of the complexities of you don't have just the human psychology of it, but you have other elements, the supernatural, the histories we don't yet know about, this interdimensional or multiple dimensional narrative, and the MacGuffin, which is the chief.
That is
sort
true.
of
Nice use of MacGuffin.
The chief is probably one of the most fascinating characters, and we really haven't seen him. He's not as prominent in the last couple of episodes.
Yeah. All right. Well, join us in a couple of weeks when we continue our trip along with the Doom Patrol. Trey, until then, why don't you tell folks where they can find you?
I am on Twitter at Arkham Asylum Doc, and on Instagram, Arkham Asylum Doc.
You can find me on Twitter. I am at bward028. I'm on Instagram at b_ward028. You can find us both on Twitter as the Arkham Sessions, at Arkham Sessions. You can find us on Facebook. Go visit TeePublic. We've got a sale going on right now where everything is up to 35% off. And you can follow our family over at Fanbase Press. See what they've got going on with their comics and all of their other great podcasts, and of course their news. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.